Care to chat? Hello and welcome to this episode of the Northern Ireland Social Care Council's popular podcast, Care to Chat. I'm Wendy Austin and it's my great pleasure to host these podcasts, hearing the stories of social care workers and social workers and their clients, and hearing too about the many different aspects and rewards of the work itself, as well as the challenges faced by the sector. Now, one of the most fundamental of those is attracting and retaining not just staff, but the right staff with the right values. That's a big focus for the Northern Ireland Social Care Council. Their website includes a toolkit on value-based recruitment, developed to help social care employers to recruit and keep workers with the values and attitudes that they need. Now, one of the experts behind that resource is Dr Shirley Boyle, lecturer, academic, Open University, who carried out an evidence-based review of retention for the Social Care Council. And I'm pleased to say who's with me now, along with Paul Rooney, professional advisor with the Social Care Council, and Caitilin Robinson, who's Homecare Area Manager with the South Eastern Health and Social Care Trust. So it's great to have you all here. Thanks very much indeed for coming along today. It really is an existential topic that we're dealing with today. So let's start with a stupid question. I'm usually quite good at those. Why is it so important to retain staff in social care? Paul, would you kick us off on that? I mean, why value-based retention?
Well, there's a number of issues. We have a growing population of people who need support in Northern Ireland, and we're also competing with a whole range of other industry in relation to attracting workforce. So in order to do that, you need to be able to provide a good offer in terms of support, in terms of continuous learning and qualifications, and valuing that workforce. People want to be valued in their work. People are attracted into social care because they want to give back, and the value base is really, really important. So we need to be attracting the right people into social care, not anybody. And we need to train and develop those people particularly well, given the complexities that social care demands. So retention is really, really important to take serious. We have huge competition in terms of recruitment right across. I think recently in the Department for Economy, we're talking something like 4,000 vacancies in Northern Ireland right across industry at all levels. So employers have a real challenge around making sure that they get the offer right for people, attracting them in and supporting them when they're there. People leave jobs if they're not happy, and they leave social care very quickly if they're not supported. So we've done a lot of work in the last couple of years around trying to understand what people want from employment and their expectations, and that information, and Shirley's done a lot of work around that with ourselves in terms of what good retention looks like. It's not scientific, but there are really good indices around that about what that should look like.
I'll come to Shirley in just a moment, but Caitilin, you're kind of on the front line. You're Homecare Area Manager, and when we were chatting before we came into the studio here, you were emphasising how important it is to keep the right people that you've got. I mean, how much of a challenge do you see that as being?
Well, I've been managing for 2 years now, and you see staff come and you see staff go, and it's disappointing when the staff that you've tried to upskill over the years just leave because they're not happy. And it's all about working with them. So when you communicate with them, and they want to feel valued, so when you communicate with them and they actually say, well, do you know what, I can't work these hours anymore, because home care a few years ago was very structured. So it was very, shift work, and now we've put in a flexible working policy, and it's retained a lot of staff. We have roughly 650 staff, and there's more vacancies to be filled. And as, Paul said, it's growing, home care. There's more people needing packages. So it's important that the staff that we have, we can make happy and we can retain, but also we can be competitive with the private providers as well by putting the likes of flexible working in place.
And you mentioned the private providers there, so that's part of your competition,
yeah,
as well as all of the other people that Paul was talking about who are involved in that whole kind of war for talent.
Yeah. So private providers would offer, before we offer flexible work, and they would have offered various shifts. You know, you can work a long day Monday, long day Sunday, and we were very structured where we had earlies 5 days in a row, 2 days off, late 6 days in a row. So, you know, we had to change our ways of working. And when you actually spoke to the 650 staff, it was they're not getting so many days off in a week. It was, you know, I can go to the private provider and they can give me 2 long days, and, you know, why would I work 5 days out of 7 here? So, yeah, we're competing with private providers mainly. That's our biggest competitor. But really it's ourselves. You know, we don't want to lose the staff that we have. So, in my opinion, I'll do anything to keep the staff that I've already upskilled, and they're great at their job, and it means the people who are right for the job remain in the job as well.
That's so important, Shirley, isn't it? And your review showed that there are many factors which can have an effect on retention. So take us through the evidence, if you would, and those kind of indices that Paul was talking about.
Okay. And just listening to Caitilin, she is living out what the evidence is saying, and certainly from the contextual factors that Paul has introduced us to, is the setting of that. So the reasons why people stay are not the same as the reasons why people leave. Social care brings people who want to help. It's a very value-based job. People come because through a sense of altruism, and they love their jobs. They love working with their service users. But sometimes that's not enough to keep people in the job. And the terms, the conditions, and things that maybe lead to job satisfaction can, unfortunately, lead people to leave social care. And in the context of staff shortages, and in the context of competition within the sector, and with other sectors as well, that's where good working environments become much more critical. So the work that we did was to look at, you know, what is the evidence around what works? How do you keep your staff? And I would love to be sitting here saying there's a silver bullet, that there's one solution, but there's not. And the evidence base is there to say that the issues and the factors around retention are well documented. We know people leave. And there has been a lot written recently around values-based recruitment, which is one part of the equation. However, we really wanted to make it, to look at, you know, there's no point in recruiting repeatedly if people are going to leave, because then you're just in this endless cycle, and it's not good for service users, for staff, or for the organisation. And so the evidence base is starting to show some promising practices. There was a wide range of evidence in different sectors, and what that highlighted was that different things work for different people. So we have a very diverse workforce, so we need to have a very diverse set of responses around how to retain staff. And that points to the need for a different range of strategies. And so if you have a different set of practices that help to retain staff, then you can probably try and plug a number of gaps. But one of the most important things is talking to your staff and finding out what works for them, because they're your best source of information. So the toolkit we developed, you know, really was quite comprehensive across a range of themes that emerged from the evidence review. And that included, you know, thinking about job satisfaction, working culture, the environment. Good relationships at work are also really important. It's hard work. It's emotive work. And also how staff feel respected or valued is important to retention. Again, terms and conditions has always been a long-standing challenge for employers, but it hasn't gone away. And flexibility, as Caitilin referred to, work-life balance. Many of the workforce are maybe have young families, also have maybe other caring responsibilities for other family members, and need to be able to respond to their lives outside of their jobs. And thinking about staff wellbeing was another theme that we looked at, and staff development, as Paul referred to, enabling people to see themselves in social care long term and having opportunities. And that requires caring leadership. It requires leaders who have come at this with their own value base around valuing the staff that they have and wanting to not just train them and make them the best that they can be, but to keep them, because they are the people you want. So that's really leading into conversations about workforce planning and how you best do that.
Caitilin, on the front line, I mean, just listening to what Shirley is saying there about the diverse workforce and how you need different strategies and the flexibility and so on, how on earth do you manage that when actually, you're trying to provide a service for your service users, but at the same time you're trying to be as flexible as you can with the people who need to be there on a daily basis?
Yeah, it's hard. I'm a manager of 60 staff, and I've had many staff come to me. A member of staff have came and said, I work opposite my husband, and her husband is also a home care worker. Our childcare is so many pounds a month. I need to leave, or I need to cut my hours. And, we don't want anyone cutting their hours either. So between myself and another home care manager, you're able to work in a shift pattern so that they're working opposite shifts but still getting the same days off. And it actually cut their childcare by 50%. So that's just one example. But then someone else could come and say, well, I want more days off. And that's when we would be looking at the long days. Long days was introduced into the arts sector 2 years ago. And I think, all 7 patches are on long days now, so it gives people a better, as Shirley had said, a better work-life balance. You get more days off, you have other commitments outside of work. But for the service users as well, it's a bit of continuity. So they're seeing the same person in the morning, at lunchtime, at tea time, at bedtime. So if you know that your client isn't feeling well in the morning, you're back to check on them at tea time. So for us, it's more of continuity for the service users. And there's been a lot of, when we go out to visit the service users, it's only praise for the flexible working, because they're happy to see the same person 4 times a day instead of maybe 4 different people 4 times a day. So it is hard to manage, but with the right support and, again, communicating with the staff. If you have a great team and they're open and honest with you and we're working together, anything can be resolved.
That's very interesting, Paul, isn't it? That the kind of flexibility which, say, 3 years ago, or maybe are we talking pre-COVID, was unthinkable, which now works, and works not just for managers but for the social care staff themselves and for their service users too. I mean, I just think that's quite interesting, the way that has developed and really worked.
Yes, Wendy, I think post-COVID, there is a COVID response in there as well. I think a lot of people after COVID became much more aware of quality of life and life and death, in a sense, right across the world. And I remember talking to one young chef who had a young family and was working like 15-hour days, crazy stuff. And when all the restaurants stopped, he went home. And that's when he recognised what he was losing out in terms of his family life and that connectivity. And he's never gone back to that work. And he now works in other industry. So I think people have become much more aware of their personal needs post-COVID. Agility is really, really important, and communication, certainly throughout COVID, was really, really important. Communicating with your staff, communicating within your organisations, and keeping people connected. And I think one of the most important bits around retention is about people feeling that they're doing a good job. We all want to do a good job, and to be valued in that sense, to be developed, and there are problems in terms of T's and C's, and there's work ongoing to look at that, and it needs to be looked at. But most of the people come into social care didn't come in with the issue around terms and conditions to come in, because as Shirley said, there was altruism and they wanted to work with people face to face. So I think it's really important that we listen to people, and the agility piece has really is worked right across the world at the minute, and people are struggling with that. We're now moving back into more sort of normal environments, and we're talking about getting everybody back into offices and all sorts of things. But there's good and bad, because when you're working at home, you lose connectivity too. So it's getting balance. Yeah. So organisations have a real challenge, I think, of getting it right within their workforce strategies and understanding their workforce needs. And that's really, really important. And developing people and keeping them connected. Because when you're connected to a role and an organisation, psychologically, you want to be there and you want to stay there and you want to grow there. And if that's missing, then, people tend to sort of, we know in social care people have left because they can earn 50p an hour elsewhere. And that's not good. And we don't want people leaving because of things like that. Mm. But people leave for a reason. And from your own experience, when, you tend to move on when you're annoyed about something, or you feel as if your needs are not met in some way. So it is a tall order in organisations to understand that diversity, as Shirley says.
Absolutely, Paul. I think that the context we're in now, organisations really need to reflect much more about what it is that they are doing to keep their staff. It's not as easy now just as getting people in the door. And there are lots of things organisations can do. And people talk sometimes about resources and about money. And money is important. We can't ignore it. Some things do cost money, but lots of things don't cost anything. And some of the evidence we found was about how to value your staff in a free way. And I think, and it's beyond this kind of tokenistic checklist of what I'm doing. It's about being meaningful in the things you do to value your staff. Because people can tell when you're being genuine in your investment in them, as in their employees, and they can tell when you're going through the motions. But lots of things are free, and lots of things are very simple, and the toolkit provides a wide, we don't have time to go through them today, but there's lots and lots and lots of things that people can do. But there are things that do cost money, and it is fair to say that, but it's a good investment, it's a good return to invest on values-based retention, because then you're saving money in lots of other ways. And you want to know that what you do is working well, that people are happy. And I think if you're invested in your organisation, it makes you feel good yourself as a manager. Because let's not forget, a lot of social care managers have been social care workers themselves. So they come with that understanding. But the taking the evidence base and using it in a meaningful way means asking yourself questions. So some of those questions are listed in thinking about, how do you compete? Do you have a reputation as a good employer? What is attractive about your company that would make someone want to come and work for you and then stay? And how does your offer compare to other providers within the sector and in other sectors, not in social care? And linked to that, if staff are leaving, reflection on what you offer is also important. Do you know what are the risk factors why staff are leaving your organisation? Because they may be unique to your organisation. Do you know when staff are thinking about leaving? Have you thought about ways to keep staff? And what are your levers for improving retention? I think those types of questions are really important for organisations to consider. And again, I'll stress, in answering those questions, ask your staff, because they hold some of those answers as well.
That's really interesting. I've written down here honesty, just from what you were saying, because that question about, what is it about my trust, in your case, Caitilin, that would make people want to come and work here? What's our unique selling point? Why would we be attractive? And if, that's the kind of question that is quite hard to answer sometimes, isn't it? And that maybe if people are leaving and you ask them why they're going, then you get an idea about what you're not doing. But it's quite hard to be that honest with yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, but you know what? I am one that constantly needs reassurance from staff that they're okay. I'm not happy just to say that there's your working pattern, there's your flexibility, that you'll see in a year for your supervision. I am one that loves feedback. I love feedback from the staff because, as Shirley says, they are the ones on the ground. They are the ones doing the job. And I came from a home care worker myself, and I had a great relationship with my manager. And no matter when I picked up the phone, she was always there to listen to. So when I went into the home care manager role, I took that experience and, you know, her skills and her values, and it sort of came with me. So now I am constantly on the phone to staff, constantly asking, you know, what can I do? Are you happy? You know, supervisions maybe every year, but it doesn't mean that's the only time you need to speak to your staff. And we have now put in place like a leavers interview. So we ask them, you know, why are you leaving? What can we do to ensure you stay? You know, if it's maybe they're going to a different career and that's something they've always wanted to do, well, what could have we improved on? You know, if someone else was coming into the service. So we're constantly looking for feedback, reassurance from staff and better ways to improve. And the staff are the ones that are going to tell us that.
Yeah, I was just thinking there's a cost element to not doing good recruitment and retention and having those policies. And one of the things that we were very frustrated about when you work in the sector, all you hear is around the inability to recruit the right people and people leaving. So there's constant recruitment. And, you know, the danger of organisations getting into these mass recruitment campaigns that run continually is really, really a high cost, because you're, you know, rolling people in and they're not staying, and we're not asking the right questions of why people aren't staying. And the cost of recruiting, training and developing people is huge. And when you do that work, and you touched on it there earlier in your conversation about your staff, you know, you don't want to lose them. But I think having exit interviews, and there's lots of organisations have exit interviews when somebody decides to go. But you know, the point raised here was we need to continually be interacting and communicating with people around their role, around their responsibilities, how they're coping, how they've been supported to cope, how they're trained, how they're developed, and how they're looked after, remunerated properly. So those are really important, essential elements. And Shirley has mentioned a number of times around the diversity in that, and there's a tall order for organisations. But having an openness to discussion, communicating, I think that came across very clearly in COVID, where lots of managers were out there and they were in daily contact with their workforce. And in our research at the time around COVID, that was really, really important to people. To know that a manager or a leader was interested in them and how they were coping with their day through really, really difficult circumstances. So it is about connectivity and understanding and being proactive as our organisations and understanding each other.
Just building upon that, communication and proactive is also visibility.
Absolutely.
And, you know, so you're always going to have attrition. People will leave because of circumstances beyond an organisation's control and nothing to do with dissatisfaction at work. And that population of staff we can do nothing about, and that's okay. And there are some big issues that organisations are not going to be able to resolve quickly and easily, but there are some quick ones. But I think in what organisations do is that they need, as well as being proactive, is to be visible to their staff, to let staff see what they are doing, let them see that they are interested in keeping their staff, not necessarily on that one-to-one level, but as a culture within the organisation, that you matter to us and you're important to us, we value you, because the wider societal viewpoint of social care is mixed. In one hand, you know, it's so important. Society could not function without social care. Many of us and our relatives are going to need, if we have not already used, social care. And so it's a high value job, but it's not always seen as a valuable job. And sometimes staff can sense that and know that they may be devalued in other ways. So I think being visible as an organisation, being visible as a manager, being out there seeking feedback, as Caitilin talked about, from staff is so important. To ask your staff, how am I doing? You know, what is important to you is important to me. And your staff are a great, great resource to help you develop ways of retaining staff that are unique to their needs and unique to your organisation's needs as well.
That word diversity, Paul, that you used there, I mean, I have actually gone through the toolkit online, and I must say I thought it was excellent, and we'll give it a bit of a boost in a moment. But one of the sections of it talked about well-being and how important it is that your staff's well-being is looked after, that they feel that they belong, that there's support and access to support. Because, and I must say, I thought this was all very interesting. It never happened in anywhere I ever worked. So, such a change has taken place. But, OK, it's grand to have support, but if you don't know how you get it, then it's actually somewhat less use to you. But also that everyone feels welcomed and that there's a kind of inclusion and psychological safety. And that's very important when you have people, Caitilin, who are in people's homes, who are trusted to be there and who feel that responsibility and who also feel the responsibility and of that caring need. I mean, it's quite a weight on your shoulders sometimes, isn't it? Despite the fact that actually most social care workers that I've come in contact with, you would never know because they're so cheerful and bright, but maybe that's on the surface and they need that support.
Oh, yeah, the staff definitely need the support. Out of a team of 60, no two individuals are the same. They all have things going on at home. They all have personal commitments. They all have, things outside of work. And it's getting to know each individual staff member. You'll know when someone's having a down day by just talking to them. You'll know when someone's, feeling a bit more cheery. Without going into it too much, I know a lot about my staff. You see them more as friends more than anything. And I know when they're having an off day or an off week, and I'm there to support them. And as you said, there's support available, and it's making sure that they know, I'm not sure if you're aware of the ins and outs of home care, but we have occupational health, we have Inspire, we have the stress toolkit, which are all sort of personal and individual for that staff member. But it's making sure that they know as well that they are valued. And when I go out to visit the service users or clients and there's compliments for a specific staff member, we let them know. I would always put it in an email to them. I would ring them and let them know, and we record it on a compliment section so that it is being recognised, their good work is being recognised. So it's important that you're not only getting, when someone comes through and says, oh, they're not doing enough or they're doing this wrong, it's, well, they actually done this really well. So it's important to note the good and the bads and ensuring that the bads can be rectified, but the goods are noticed as well.
What kind of personal experience, Caitilin, have you had of this sort of situation? I mean, have you ever been tempted to leave?
Surprisingly enough, Wendy, yes, actually about 3 years ago, I was in home care for about a year and I was having a bit of difficulty with communication with management, and myself and my partner both worked in home care, and my pattern, it just wasn't giving me a better home work-life balance. So I did speak to another manager and say that I was planning to leave, and it wasn't until that manager sat me down, offered me the long day working pattern on the same pattern as my partner, a change of management with better communication. It was more effective. I actually felt listened to, and I went to that patch, and now here I am 2.5 years later as a home care manager myself. So if it wasn't for feeling valued and feeling listened to, 3 years ago, I could have been in a completely different job now. And, the skills that I learned as a home care worker, I wouldn't have been able to pass them on to my team at the minute.
Do you think that makes you a better manager now that you've kind of been through it yourself?
Well, I'm not going to, make my head a bit bigger, but I believe from my experience as a home care worker, you know what goes on the road, you know what they go through, you know how difficult it is, getting into clients in the morning who could feel unwell and lunchtime unfortunately could have passed away. There's a lot that people don't see behind the scenes in home care. So I've experienced that, and I've experienced what it's like not to have an effective manager, and I wouldn't want any of my staff on the road feeling like they can't come to me and be open and be honest with me. So yeah, I do believe my experience as a home care worker, my experience with different managers and my last manager has made me a better manager today.
So your value-based retention worked for you in the end?
Well, it worked for me. I'm a living example of value-based retention, so yes, it did.
If you're a social care employer, either in the private or the public sector, and you're listening to us today, and thank you very much for listening to Care to Chat, what would be your top tips for value-based recruitment and retention? Shirley, going to start with you?
Absolutely. My top tip would be self-reflection. Ask yourself those hard and challenging questions. Use the toolkit. There is so much information there to help employers. We did a launch of the toolkit last year, and in some of the presentations and conversations, people were saying to us, gosh, some of these things I never thought about, but they're really good ideas. So it does contain a wealth of information and tips specific to certain, areas, whether it's well-being, staff development and so forth. So, get in there and use that toolkit. And the third and final tip is talk to your staff. Ask them about retention, because they know a lot more, and they're the people who are best able to advise about what might work.
Paul?
Yes, that's correct, Shirley. I think the value-based recruitment toolkit and the retention piece of it also needs to focus on how do we attract the right people, and how do we interview people, for example. So we've had the leadership frameworks, we've had competency-based interviews, but if you're attracting people into the care sector, you want people with the right personal attributes, the connectivity, the communication, the empathy. So I think how you recruit is really important. And value-based interview processes are really helpful for organisations to try and tease out the sort of right skills and maintaining that sort of development. I think is really, really important, because we need the right people in social care. The other bit I think is really important to acknowledge is that social care workforce work in really, really complex situations. And, as Caitilin was saying there, you go into a home. I know of a situation in the last while where a home care worker went in to do her morning work, and within a minute she was doing CPR to keep somebody alive. So this is not a career that should not be acknowledged in terms of skills and complexity and one's ability to be able to deliver such a wide range of responses in some awful difficult circumstances also. So, building up and developing this workforce is so important. The investment needed to do that, and when we have that investment in place, we need to maintain it, and organisations need to be much more aware of the emphasis on that in terms of that, as Shirley says, the values, town halls, communicating with your workforce is really, really central to understanding how they can do their job better.
I remember a friend of ours who is a hotelier saying on one occasion that he wasn't interested in qualifications, but he said, if I'm interviewing someone and they're really enthusiastic, they're great communicators, and they sound like they care, and then you get the feeling that they care, he said, I can teach them. I can train them the rest, but those are the kind of people I want in my organisation. Not quite the same thing, but not that different actually in some ways. But Caitilin, what would be your top tips?
I think just to sort of echo what Shirley and Paul were saying, we are having a lot more complex cases in home care, and when you have the staff in place, keep them. Do what you can to keep them staff. If they want to progress in their career, allow them to progress within the department. Go from a home care worker right up to a senior manager. But for me, in my experience, it's talk to your staff. Don't have, a narrow mind of what you can and can't do to be flexible. Go in with them with an open mind. Let them tell you what they need. And if you have the resources to do it, put it in place, because the staff that we have are the staff that want to be in the job and should be in the job. And by putting the flexibility and having that open mind, it keeps the staff that are meant to be in this job and meant to care for people, they'll stay in the job.
Look, it's been absolutely terrific hearing from all of you. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Shirley, Caitilin and Paul. And thank you for listening. And remember, the Values-Based Retention Toolkit, it's in the Northern Ireland Social Care Council Learning Zone. And remember too that all the Care to Chat podcasts are available on the Social Care Council's website or wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe. It's free. To rate us and tell all your friends and colleagues. Thanks for listening.